Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 15th of May, 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. We're delighted to be joined by David Scott, bringing us Northern Exposure from north of the border, and Mark Anderson reporting from the United States.
Okay, well, we've got some really good news, Brian, because Vladimir Zelensky, is in the UK. Meeting Rishi Sunak. This is the image that Rishi pushed out this morning. We didn't show any of the more explicit images because some of the mainstream press have been showing the hugging and the kissing and tongues down the throats, this kind of thing. But this is what Zelensky tweeted out this morning. Today, London, the UK is a leader when it comes to expanding our capabilities on the ground and in the air. This cooperation will continue today. I will meet my friend Rishi. We will conduct substantive negotiations face-to-face and in delegations. So according to to number 10 anyway, this is the first what they call world leader that Rishi Sunak has hosted at Chequers. Zelensky will update Rishi Sunak on his meetings with European leaders over the weekend, which we'll talk about in a second. They're going to talk about how we're going to continue to support Ukraine's needs and how that's going to be expanded to the international community, both in terms of immediate military equipment and long-term defences. And then the number 10 press release also said that last week the UK confirmed that we've provided Storm Shadow precision missiles to Ukraine. And today, Rishi Sunak will confirm the further UK provision of hundreds of air defence missiles and further unmanned aerial systems, including hundreds of new long-range attack drones with a range of over 200 kilometres. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
It is going to make a difference, Mike. It's going to prolong the conflict and it's going to result in the deaths of tens of thousands more Ukrainians. It will also kill Russians, but it takes us closer to World War III. I find this whole business obscene. If the British government wants to get into Ukraine and fight, then we should get the troops in and they should fight on the ground. We should get Ben Wallace in. We should get Rishi Sunak and all the rest of the politicians and their sons and daughters, and they should fight. But what is so obscene is this is a war by UK, NATO against Russia, but using Ukrainians essentially. I'm running out of words to describe it. It is obscene.
Zelensky in the UK today, but he has been on a whistle-stop tour of Europe, as we just mentioned. So here he is in Italy, where he met Pope Francis. He met the Italian Prime Minister and the Italian President. He said, I'm meeting with the President of Italy, Sergio Mattarella, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, and the Pope, an important visit for approaching victory of Ukraine. So that was him meeting the Italians. And in a second, we'll see him meeting the Germans, because as soon as he finished with Italy, he headed off to Germany, where he met Schultz. There they are shaking hands and so on. Very similar kind of thing. Shake hands with the leader, have a quick inspection tour, and then have a press conference. This was the kind of format of it. But of course, it didn't end there because, the Ukraine was awarded the Karls Prize for 2023. I don't know what we think about that. This is the Charlemagne Prize. David, have you got any?
It's political Eurovision.
It is political Eurovision. Just before I ask comment from David here, just make the point that if you look at this image, just the very bottom left-hand corner there, you'll see the medal itself in its box on a stand. Unfortunately, it fell off the stand just apparently spontaneously during his speech, and he had to stop his speech and go and pick it up off the floor. So I'm not sure who kicked it over. But anyway, David, what are your thoughts on the Charlemagne Prize going to Ukraine?
Well, it's all going towards that great example of a united Europe, a united, militarily strong, continentally dominant Europe that Charlemagne represents. So, there is a logic to it. It's a bit grim, though.
Indeed. So coming back to the UK, then, this is what Rishi had to say this morning. This is a crucial moment in Ukraine's resistance to a terrible war of aggression they did not choose or provoke. And well, did they or did they not? Did the UK, or how much involvement did the UK have in any provocation of Russia? I just want to remind everybody, because at the end of the press release that Number 10 issued today, they said that since the outbreak of full-scale war, the UK has also trained 15,000 Ukrainian troops in the UK on top of 22,000 troops trained in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022 under Operation Orbital. Now, many people won't be aware of Operation Orbital, but this is the badge that the participants all wear. And you can see the UK flag above. And so, well, the press release said 2014. In fact, Operation Orbital, this is the UK's training mission to Ukraine. It was established, according to the UK, following the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia. That's the UK's words. It was established in 2015. So the UK government adopted a decision to establish a training group of British instructors called Operation Orbital, and to deploy British military personnel to Ukraine to provide guidance and training to the Ukrainian armed forces. It's almost as if they had figured already by that point that some kind of conflict with Russia was inevitable, and maybe they were doing a little bit to provoke that themselves. But anyway, here we move on to 2018. And Orbital, which had up to that point just been about land forces, was extended to the maritime domain. So this brought in instructor teams from the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, to train the Ukrainian Navy following threats to the Azov Sea, or in the Azov Sea. And then in 2019, the UK government decided to extend Operation Orbital until 2023. We'll see whether it gets any further extension in Ukraine itself, but obviously the new way is for the Ukrainians to come to the UK for training instead.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the second figure there, but I think you were talking about a batch of 17,000 troops and a batch of 22,000.
15,000 that they've trained in the UK in the last year, and 22,000 that they've trained in Ukraine.
15 and 22 in theatre, so 37,000 troops. And the key question for the UK government is how many of those men are still alive? And if they went to the front, the answer is very few of them.
Yes. In the meantime, then, Rishi Sunak, after today's meeting with Zelensky, is himself going to fly off to the Council of Europe summit in Reykjavik. That's taking place tomorrow and Wednesday. Zelensky is going to join that meeting virtually, apparently. But Rishi is supposedly going there to try to raise weapons, we should say, for Ukraine. This is all about getting support for Ukraine, but also he's apparently going to be speaking to people at the Council of Europe about the migration problem in the UK. Okay, but mainly it's about weapons for Ukraine. And then he's off to the G7 in Japan, where he is again attempting to raise weapons, or raise money for weapons and supplies and so on. So he's going to drive, he says, new investment into the UK from Japan, but it's mainly, again, about security and support for Ukraine. So he's on his tour of the world. David?
I'll just point out it's Hiroshima in Japan.
That's right.
Just saying.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. This is a good point. Yeah, okay. In the meantime, of course, we have NATO, the latest NATO exercises going on, and
well, that's not very good for global warming, is it?
Well, this particular
outrageous.
Shocking.
That should be an electric tank.
Well, it should be an electric tank.
Yeah.
This is exercise Spring Storm. So 1,500 troops going over to on top of what's already in the Enhanced Forward Presence battle group in Estonia. So personnel from all three services of the armed forces being deployed in Estonia to carry out exercises and operations. I'm not sure, can you explain what's the difference between an exercise and an operation? An operation, I would have thought, was something which is happening.
Well, the operation should be reality.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's exercises and operations, then what are they actually doing in Ukraine, in Estonia? So 14,000 personnel from 11 NATO countries are going to demonstrate their interoperability in multi-domain training exercises as part of this. So let's see, what have we got? The RAF are going to carry out training exercises in reconnaissance and air-land integration. And my question is it just going to be exercises? I don't know, but anyway, this is what Ben Wallace had to say. While the Russian army continues their illegal invasion of Ukraine, threatening stability in Europe, the UK and our allies will continue to support Ukraine and defend our shared values and freedom. So that's the comment that he made with respect to this exercise. So people can make up their own minds as to whether this is just about a training program or whether there's something going on under the cover of a training program.
That's shared values and freedom under the rules-based international order, of course.
Yes.
Well, a very, very quick summary of what's happening on the battlefront. And the key bit is Ukraine has started an offensive. I'm using clips from a variety of people. I'm giving recognition to the people who are spending the time to analyse what's happening, because, of course, we can't trust mainstream media or the BBC. So this one is showing the Donbass area around Bakhmut, and the yellow arrows are showing the general direction of Ukrainian attacks. Don't be fooled by the size of the arrows, because the size of ground that the Ukrainians have taken is generally very small, a kilometre, a mile into Russian territory. Losses on both sides have been exceptionally heavy, but over the last couple of days in particular, things have stabilised and do not appear to have moved forward on the Ukrainian side. But recognition to the bravery of the Ukrainian troops, because they are out there doing the bidding of the West and attacking the Russians so Zelensky can get more weapons. So if we bring in the next one, this is from Weeb Union, so a different source, but we're seeing the same thing, attacks around the flanks of Bakhmut. And if I just bring in another one here, you can see a little bit more detail of one of the areas. The depth of the salient, which is just to the northwest of Bakhmut, is about 2 kilometers or a little bit under. So the Ukrainians moved forward over the frontline trenches of the Russians, but then was stopped by the rear troops, and that is the pattern now across the battlefield. So attacks have taken place in other sectors up to the north. This area, possibly about 50,000 Ukrainian troops spread between a northern attack and a southern attack, but it's very difficult to pin down the actual numbers of troops. 2 Russian aircraft were shot down, an Su-25 and an Su-24, and also an Mi-8 helicopter. This is the result of the Ukrainians bringing their air defences forward in the battlefield, but this is not a major offensive, it would appear at the moment, by the Ukrainians, and many of the commentators doubt whether they can do it. If we have a look at Bakhmut, this is the so-called citadel area of the Ukrainians. So this is an area of high-rise buildings which were all heavily fortified, and the Wagner forces are now in through the perimeter, and they maintain that they have 20 key buildings to take, but sometimes it's taking a day or 2 days to take each building. But perhaps most importantly, the Russians have unleashed a ferocious missile attack on staging areas and ammunition dumps, not only close to the front itself, but deep into Ukraine. Let's have a look at footage of this massive explosion.
Ебать осколки нахуй. Охуеть нахуй. Ебать, десь тут осколок впав нахуй.
So a massive explosion. Nobody quite knows how many tons, hundreds of tons of munitions were taken out in that Russian attack, but clearly a massive amount of ammunition. And if you listen carefully, you could hear that there were continuous explosions going on as munitions exploded after the main strike. If we look at this embedded clip here, we'll just play this on screen for you. If you pop it on. And this one should come up. And the significance of this is you can see the scale of these explosions in relations to the buildings that you can see in the foreground. So is this UK taxpayers' money going up in smoke? Is this depleted uranium? Nobody knows, but we know that the Russians now are playing a really hard game, and they're going for all of the munitions and the reinforcements from NATO. There's the sheer scale of that, and we have to say what is in that smoke and what is actually now being dumped over the poor Ukrainian population. If we carry on through, there's quite a lot of talk over social media, which we're challenging at the moment, but people are saying that is it possible that there was depleted uranium shells in that dump? We're going to ask the question, what does happen when UK's depleted uranium shells are destroyed? Does that result in an increase in radiation in the area? So this is circulating. We are at the moment not convinced by what's circulating on social media, but the fear factor is one thing, the truth is another. We're going to thank Alex O from Berkhamhampstead, who was kind enough to say he's recording radiation levels in UK on his own home Geiger counter, and he's going to be keeping us informed about what picture he sees. So we'll hopefully have more from Alex. But you've got some comments on this as well.
Well,
Mike.
just because those graphs were circulating around the place, so I wanted to see the source, and the source is the Joint Research Centre Radioactive Environmental Monitoring website for the European Commission. And if we have a look at that particular measurement, we can see 157, a daily average for gamma radiation, 157 nanosieverts per hour. And we look at that's the graph that's been circulating on social media. And, the implication on social media is that where you see that massive rise to the right-hand side, from about 95 nanosieverts to what's that, about 150 or so, that seemed to coincide with the
date of the explosion.
The explosion, the date of the explosion. But actually, if you zoom in on that, it's not. The rise happened 2 days before the explosion. So there must be some other explanation for this, and I'd like to know what that explanation is. So that's why we're still skeptical about exactly what the cause of that rise is.
Right, but we prolong the war. These type of attacks are going to increase. And David, just before you move on, this must be taking us ever closer to World War III.
Well, this is the question. How the more effective the Ukrainians are, and this is, you covered the small-scale counter attacks that are going on just now. That's one thing. The more effective the Ukrainian counterattacks are, the more likely it is that the Russians will look to take out some of the supply lines that are helping the Ukrainians. And that, of course, would bring them more directly into conflict with NATO. So this is vastly dangerous. And nobody, it would appear, in Western governments seems to care.
I would even go further. It's not that they don't care. They absolutely care. They're absolutely enthusiastic that we maintain those supplies running, and they, in some cases, are openly calling for direct confrontation. I'm talking about Tobias Ellwood there as an example. So it goes beyond not caring. Anyway, David, let's move on to health and, what's going on with blood clot deaths?
Well, here we've got Medscape UK reporting, and they're raising the alarm over the blood clot deaths because they're still elevated. And they're pointing out a really very worrying fact. They say that vital information about the serious condition is not being published 3 years after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thrombosis UK, a charity, warned that deaths involving blood clots are higher than expected. Before the pandemic hit, hospitals were publishing data on the number of patients who had been assessed for blood clots. In March 2020, NHS England took the decision to suspend data collection on venous thromboembolism, also known as VTE, risk assessments to, quote, release capacity in providers and commissioners to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Data collection and publication is yet to resume. Given the fact that we've got elevated deaths way beyond anything we had during the pandemic, trademark, and given the fact that blood clots are a known side effect of the vaccine, what could possibly be worse than not collecting that data at this point, gentlemen?
Well, I would throw the question back to you then and say, if you knew in advance or you suspected in advance one of the outcomes of a mass vaccination program using a jab which had not been properly assessed, tested, and given proper clinical trials, if you knew that the possible outcome of that was blood clots and heart conditions, and perhaps you didn't want that evidence gathered, then obviously you would switch off the data collection at that point.
Well, there's a thought, yes. On a related matter here, there was an excellent turnout and an excellent event organised by the Scottish Vaccine Injured Group in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. Here it's been reported in the Scottish Daily Express, a very good and detailed piece saying how the vaccine injured feel abandoned and many feeling suicidal. The photograph here of the leading members of the group, Ruth O'Rafferty, John Watt, Louise Whitford, Andrew Carlin and Alex Mitchell. Many of these people I've met, and more power to their elbow in the campaign they're running. Alex Mitchell's, who had to have a leg amputated because of his reaction, says he knows of 9 people who have taken their lives due to their injuries. He said they've had enough of the gaslighting, the pain, the fact that nobody's listening to them, and the whole world has turned against them. And Ruth added, we're offering support to people who are desperate. I was speaking to somebody just last week who was admitting that they were really, really desperate. They're in their bed. They've been in their bed for 18 months. Because they don't have long COVID, they don't have access to long COVID clinics. They're not getting any medical help because, they said, they thought it was the vaccine. And the ministerial response to this comes from Public Health Minister Jenny Minto. She said, like any vaccine, COVID-19 vaccines can cause side effects, most of which are mild or moderate. Serious or long-lasting side effects are rare but possible. I don't remember them saying that before when they were actually administering the vaccines, but still, these side effects need to be continuously balanced against the expected benefits in preventing illness. Are they being? I would question that as well. So vaccines are continually monitored to detect adverse events, and public health bodies in Scotland and across the globe are closely monitoring for unexpected side effects following COVID-19 vaccination. Now, gentlemen, that's not true. I've written to public health bodies in Scotland, and they just say, we're not doing this. We're just asking the MHRA. It's all about what they say. We just do what we're told. So this idea that there's lots of bodies in Scotland and all around the world looking at the safety of this is not true. There are very few, like the MHRA, the FDA in America, and everyone's deferring to them. And we know the standard of checking we're getting from that source. This is very worrying. On a slightly different note, but relating to COVID, I came across this. It's a comedy set from a comedian called James Donald Forbes McCann, a fine Scottish name. And he's talking about his recollections and feelings after the so-called pandemic. And what I wanted to play this because you can see the penny dropping. You can see the realization of the mistakes that were made by the general public in how they reacted to this and how they reacted to the campaign run to frighten them. I think it's very encouraging that people like this are speaking out in this manner.
This long-running police investigation here in Scotland of the SNP's finances.
You want to tell me?
Wrong one.
Well, it's the
Sorry, that's the wrong video.
Okay. Well,
That's
I do
the wrong
apologize,
video.
and we don't have it,
Well-
David. I'm sorry.
Well, David, we can
Okay.
help you out here because we've got a couple of other clips and really people speaking out. We're going to have a look at the EU Parliament, but let's just give credit where it's due. So I received an email here from Andy, said I'm a follower of Richard Vobes on YouTube, also a member of UK Column. And it gave me a link through to some videos, and I watched the videos. This is it, International COVID Summit 3, which was the 3rd of May. This was held in the European Parliament, and my goodness, 2 MEPs standing up to be counted. Now, the first clip is a little bit long because it's 4 minutes long, so we'll probably watch a couple of minutes of it. You'll get a feel for it. But these 2 men, in my opinion, doing what our MPs should be doing. Of course, we got Sir Christopher Chope and we've got Andrew Bridgen, but now we see that even in the European Parliament, MEPs are speaking out. Let's have a listen to part of the first clip.
And to welcome you here today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm Christian Terhish, along with my colleague Ivan Sinčić, and some more colleagues right here in the front row. We are welcoming all of you in the European Parliament. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for fighting, I would say, for the same cause all over the world. In October of 2021, when we started the first press conference in Strasbourg, where we tried to defend, first of all, our rights as MEPs to enter this building without a green certificate, and the rights of all the workers helping us right now, translating and doing all the technical work to be able to enter and do their job without being conditioned of a green certificate. We haven't realized at that point in time about the gravity and the seriousness of everything that was happening around the world. Initially, for us, it was a matter of principles. We were elected by the people, for the people. We should have been allowed to enter the building to perform what we were elected for. So we started small. We were 4 MEPs initially. All 4 of us are here. But then after 2 weeks, more MEPs reached out to us. When we posted the first press conference online, we were shocked by the many thousands of emails that we received from all over the world telling us, well, finally someone is saying something. Because everybody looked around and said, well, it's not good what is happening, but, you know, nobody, I would say, in politics or in civil society or even in the media was talking seriously about what was happening. So we started small, and just by kept asking questions, you know, presenting what was happening from our perspective, you know, more and more people got engaged. But on the other side of the ocean, you guys were doing what you were doing from a medical perspective. So now after a year and some months, we are kind of meeting together, you know, here in the European Parliament. On one side, us as MEPs fighting for freedom, for liberty. In Europe, in our case, I saw that many members of the US Congress are doing the same thing in the United States and in many other countries around the world. And I think the event today that we are hosting here in the European Parliament, the International COVID Summit, the 3rd edition, it is important mainly for all of us, you know, to share ideas and to know each other and to maybe come up with what we could do in the future. But more importantly, this event, it's important for all the hundreds of millions of people, maybe billions of people who will hear about this event and watch us. Because what happened...
So, in my opinion, this is a really excellent MEP standing up. He's pulling people together. He's actually talking about what can be done, and he's acknowledging the fact that ultimately that scientists were not listened to, and really these people need our support. Let's have a listen to his colleague speaking, another MEP. And this is really showing us what can be done when people start to speak out, the numbers grow, And of course, if the support comes in, the speed at which it grows will increase.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Dear guests, dear friends, and all of our colleagues, welcome to International COVID Summit and welcome to European Parliament. We will be discussing scientific, social, medical and legal findings of the past 3 years of COVID crisis. Now, in my opening speech, I must state that I am honored to be with you all here today. I had an opportunity to be present at the first International COVID Summit in Rome in 2021, which had a focus on early treatments. I remember those were very dark times. I'm also very proud that you, during the heart of the COVID crisis, had spoken the scientific truth while under heavy mainstream media shelling and government discreditation attempts. In the meantime, we have been proven right on so many things, while the narrative of the pandemic marketing, as we call it in Croatia, has collapsed. It was us who followed the science, but we also followed human rights, rule of law, and the principle of freedom. Some bureaucrats and politicians in European institutions, national governments, and regulatory agencies are not yet ready to admit that they were wrong, because that would mean accountability, even before criminal law. But we will keep reminding them they will have to face consequences because the tide has turned against them. We are here to exchange findings and to send a strong message to European lawmakers and government agencies. The people of Europe and the world is expecting this from us. I am here today looking forward to hear your presentations on patents, effects of mandates, on early treatments, vaccine efficacy, effects on reproductive system, children, all-cause mortality, freedoms and legality surrounding COVID crisis, and many others. Thank you very much.
So accountability, we're now using the right words. These people are going to be held accountable for their actions, but both these MEPs really spelling out the picture that many people injured, they're recognising the mortality, and they're saying we are going to do something about it. So I'm looking at those two men, and I'm looking at what is happening in UK Parliament, and it's shameful. David.
Well, this is my point. We had one parliamentarian say things like this in Westminster, the Mother of Parliament, and he was hounded out of the Conservative Party and called a racist and anti-Semite for his trouble.
Well, David, what I would say to that is at least all that happened to him was he was hounded out of his Paris, bad enough. But in Germany, Sucrit Bhakti, unfortunately, is significantly worse off because he's not just being hounded out of any particular organization, he's being prosecuted for the comments that he made. And some of the comments that he made were echoed by Andrew Bridgen. So let's just have a look. Sucrit Bhakti, of course, member of Doctors for COVID Ethics, and has been featured on many of the all of the Doctors for COVID Ethics symposiums that we have helped run. He is, I think, Brian, an absolute gentleman. He knows what he's talking about. He has published hundreds of scientific papers on a range of different issues. He knows what he's talking about, but unfortunately, some of his comments were taken to be in breach of German legislation. So let's look at what he is actually being prosecuted or accused of: having incited hatred against a religious group and attacked the human dignity of others by insulting and maliciously disparaging that religious group while acting in concert in a manner likely to disturb the public peace. That's one charge. The other charge is having publicly trivialized an act committed under the rule of the National Socialism of the kind described in Section 6(1) of the International Criminal Code in a manner likely to disturb public peace. So this has arisen following two events. One was an interview that he gave in Germany to Mr. Kai Stutt, and that interview was published on several platforms online in 2021 in July. In that interview, he criticized what Israel had been doing to the Israeli people during the pandemic. And then he spoke subsequently at a campaigning event in Kiel in Germany also in July of that year to approximately 200 people. And this was probably the comment which got him into trouble. In particular, this final goal is the creation of the new reality and involves nothing less than the second Holocaust. And of course, he was talking about the mRNA, the rollout of mRNA jabs, and so on. So he made comments, and as I say, David, anybody that's spoken to Sucrit Bhakdi knows just what a gentleman he is. He was in no way making any disparaging comment about any group. He was comparing what Western governments were doing, and in one case, the Israeli government was doing to their own people, and he was comparing it to historical events. But I'm just staggered that this is reaching a court case. It is now coming to court in Germany on the 23rd of May. I don't know what to say any more than that.
It's really horrendous. I mean, you're absolutely right. The gentleness with which he approaches this subject is manifest for all to see. The idea that this label of anti-Semitic can be put on someone, a Holocaust denial can be put on someone simply for mentioning the Holocaust as a point of comparison is ludicrous. It's absolutely beyond belief. And here we see the problem of having laws which prohibit speech, right? Because some people didn't like what a Canadian-German Ernst Zundel said about the Holocaust. We've made laws that mean that anyone who mentions it, who falls foul of a particular political power structure, can be pinned to the wall using this entirely unjustifiable legislation against free speech. It's ridiculous. Now, the issue here is even if this goes to court and he's completely exonerated, this will have harmed him personally very severely. This is to intimidate him and anyone who wants to stand up alongside him and talk about how much harm the vaccines are actually doing. Have they got the message?
What I noticed there, Mike, if the charge that you put on screen is actually the wording of the charge.
Right, apologies for that. That was completely my fault. I pressed the wrong button. We should explain, Stephanie is on holiday this week, and so for the first time in goodness knows how many months, I'm pressing the buttons here, and so it might take me a little while to get back into the way of things. But anyway, apologies for that. Go back to what you were saying.
Well, what I was talking about, Mike, is if the wording of the charge against Bhakdi that you had on screen is correct, it's only talking about a religious group. Why should we be shy about talking about the Jewish community if the problem is indeed with the Jewish community? Let's get the whole thing out into the open and discuss it properly and deal with it in the right way. But it's the way it's done in an undertone. We don't want to really talk about the issue. We don't really want to mention it, and we should. That's an opinion on it. But is he going to be exonerated of these charges, or is he going to prison?
Well, that remains to be seen. David?
He raised the issue of Israel and the way the Israeli government were treating the Israeli people. This was an entirely justifiable thing to do because Israel was the most vaccinated country in the world. And out of this giant medical experiment on the Jewish population, I would point out, conducted by their own government, came a lot of very interesting data. And the data did not validate the vaccination program, quite the reverse. And you saw different communities within Israel adopt different policies towards the vaccination program and have different health outcomes. The data was very, very interesting and very telling. So it was entirely appropriate that he would be pointing to that example because it was the most statistically important and valid example that we had at the time.
That's absolutely right. Now, I just want to finish this little segment with a little bit of video because a couple of months ago, Sucrit Bhakti attended a lecture which was being given by a Swiss author and historian, Daniel Genzer. And this was in Kiel in Germany. And so I just want to let people see the kind of support that he has, if you haven't seen this video already, because what happened was absolutely spontaneous once people saw Sucrit arriving to join the rest of the audience to watch this presentation. So I just wanted to show that, just to show the support that he has in the local community, and we'll see what happens when that goes to court. But if anybody would like to offer support, of course, I'm quite certain that would be very much appreciated. Okay, let's move on. If you'd like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there. That'd be very much appreciated. You could pick something up at the UK Column shop. But please do share anything you find on the various platforms, including UK or especially ukcolumn.org.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Well, Mark Anderson will be coming on screen with us shortly, but we'd just like to say to our viewers and listeners that the excellent article by Mark, Meet the Urban Seven, the bridge from global cities to world governance policy circles, that's been posted on the UK Column website. It's a really excellent analysis of everything to do with the city-states and the increasing power of mayors associated with those cities.
And where does that take us?
This is
David?
I think this is David.
Yeah, so this is Tom Doyle interview. It's up on the website just now. This is on clerical child abuse with particular reference to the Roman Catholic Church. Tom Doyle is a former priest and has dedicated his life to fighting this ill. And I would have to say, of all the people I've talked to, and I've talked to quite a number in this field, I found him to be astoundingly well informed and well judged in what he said. I've already had really interesting responses via email from people who have seen this interview and have been similarly impressed. So I hope people will check that out.
Okay, thank you, David. Well, we'd also like to say that the Public Child Protection Wales fundraiser is going extremely well. So UK Column supporting alongside Louise Collins from Liberty Tactics the work of these very brave mums and dads. I was corrected over that, is mums and dads, and you can see there that funds are now coming in towards the 100,000 goal. I kept my pledge and paid £10 per child in the Gerrish family and £10 for the grandchildren. And I suggested that maybe that ought to be the way people looked at it. This is about our children, and I'd encourage anybody who feels they can give to help these mums before the courts effectively try and bankrupt them.
But a fantastic response from UK Column supporters.
It has been lovely to see.
And thank you very much for that. Now, an event taking place right across the world. So this, hey globalists, you've overplayed your hand. We see you, we know your plans. Guess what? We are many, we're united. And so there's going to be an event taking place on the 20th of May. Now, the UK locations are Newcastle, Swansea, London, Ashford, Bristol, Portsmouth, Peacehaven, Totnes, Aberdeen, Nottingham and Canterbury. So I suggest that everybody gets onto the website. The details will be in the show notes, of course, and gets along to that on May the 20th. In the meantime, I just wanted to highlight this petition. It's on the Ripples website. It's No Knighthood for Boris Johnson's dad. So what it's saying is Boris Johnson is trying to hand a knighthood to his own father, Stanley Johnson. This absurd level of corruption cannot stand. Johnson has nominated his father to become a Sir as part of his resignation honours. and that was revealed by the Times. And so they're saying this is a list that outgoing prime ministers get to choose, but it's unprecedented to select your own family members. So Boris Johnson's track record of nepotism and appointments, according to this petition, having previously put his brother and several close friends into the House of Lords. And so the current is 28,258 signatures, at least when I took that screenshot. There's the URL if you would like to get involved in that one yourselves.
Okay, well, we'll just put this one on screen. So thank you to the viewer that pointed it out to me, that within a couple of days of becoming king, Charles was busy breaking the ground at Cambridge University's Whittle Lab, which will be leading the which will be the leading global centre for net zero aviation and energy. So Charles, in no time at all, back into his World Economic Forum agenda. We'll be keeping a close eye on him. Also like to pop this one on screen, which is that Jeff emailed us really with some worries. What is going to happen when you, the UK column, are targeted by the censors? How are you going to deal with it? Well, we have taken some steps to protect ourselves from that. But at the end of the day, the only way we can protect ourselves is to have massive support from UK column viewers and wider audience. So if you like what we're doing and you want to keep us going, support us and tell others about us. David.
And of course, we have had quite a bit of attack from the censors. We're banned from YouTube, it would seem. Certainly the main site is long gone. And anything with Mike Robinson attached to it seems to be particularly hated by YouTube. I'm only just back on Twitter after a 2-year ban for telling the truth about COVID vaccination damage. We are facing this, and we've been banned from other sites as well. Vimeo, wasn't it? They threw us off for, again, speaking out about vaccine damage.
Absolutely. And of course, David, we should never forget that the censorship attack on us began really with the Authority for Television on Demand in 2013 and 2014. So we're getting quite experienced at this now. But anyway, let's move on and welcome Mark to the program now. On Friday's news program, Mark Patrick Henningsen was talking about Title 42 and the immigration situation in Texas. Let's get up to date on that.
Yes, great to be here. I'll also be announcing Bilderberg's machinations a little bit later in today's show. Yes, Title 42 indeed ended this past Thursday at midnight, U.S. time. And of course, that's that pandemic era health regulation that was one criterion rather, to keep people out or to expel them from the United States over so-called COVID transmission concerns. And now the U.S. is under Title 8, the basic border laws, the basic border protection laws. And this is a news item. I believe this came from PBS, the equivalent of your BBC on this slide. Just a little bit here. The Biden administration announced new policies this week that would help migrants seek new legal pathways to enter the U.S., but also tamp down on illegal entry into the U.S. Now, that's not altogether honest. I'll explain a little bit later what those new policies are. But there is concern that efforts from lawmakers in the White House will not address the number of people trying to enter the country. Title 42 reportedly has been used more than 2.8 million times to remove migrants. Now, moving on from there, we have a little more detail here. I won't read it all. This was that same news announcement from the public broadcasting. I'll read the last part. Migrants are now essentially banned from seeking asylum in the U.S. if they first don't seek protection in countries that they traveled through or applied online. Families allowed in as their immigration cases progress will face curfews and GPS monitoring. Meanwhile, new migration hubs, there it is, will be stationed in Colombia and Guatemala with plans to open 100 more in the Western Hemisphere. Now, what that is in a weird way, the Biden administration is borrowing a page from Trump. Trump had the Remain in Mexico policy where people seeking asylum would have to remain on the Mexican side of the border and apply. and not be allowed to get a toehold in the United States. Now, Biden would seem to be being Trump on steroids now. Biden is basically proposing these regional application centers, possibly hundreds of them, strung out across Central America. So if you're a Guatemalan and you want to come to the United States, you'll have a local place reasonably close to go apply for asylum to the U.S. So that's like remain in Guatemala or remain in Honduras, not just remain in Mexico. So this would seem to be outdoing Trump. But the people I've talked to that work the border, their concern is that what actually mean is even more people will be allowed to enter the United States, and the asylum rules, the concern is that they'll be loosened too much. And then in a more clandestine, less visible manner, even more people will be allowed into the United States without the clashes at the border and without people camping out at the border, which is very visible and creates a lot of concerns and anxiety. So Biden would appear to be being very tough on illegal immigration, but people that have been watching this a long time are saying, wait a minute, he's just trying to be more subterranean about it and create almost like an underground railroad. So we'll have to see how this pans out in the weeks, months, and years ahead, literally. So lots of titanic changes and lots to look out for. This next item here, Texas bill would create state-run border protection unit as Title 42 ends. Now, one of my guys on the ground, literally in the weeds, at the border in Maverick County, northwest of me, about 200, 300 miles away, he's telling me that this Texas bill, HB 20, may have been scuttled by the Speaker of the House and the Texas legislator, Dade Phelan. But from what I can gather, the Texas bill HB 20 to create this border protection unit may have got a new lease on life by being attached to another bill as an amendment. So it appears that the bill has been revived. That's a little bit tentative, but my sources say the bill's been revived by being made into an amendment attached to another bill. So HB 20 is not dead yet, you might say. And HB 20, as I note here, would create a state immigration unit to, quote, arrest, apprehend, or detain persons crossing the Texas-Mexico border unlawfully, something traditionally that's been the preserve of the federal government. So this is a little bit of a small taste of the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. Texas is trying to pass this bill that evidently Governor Abbott would sign. I think he knows he'd be too unpopular if he didn't sign it. And that would make Texas a little bit more like a nation state. And therefore, it would have broader autonomy if this bill passes to do what the federal government would normally do, absent the federal government doing what it ought to do. So that's what this bill is about. However, there's federal legislation 2, HB 2, a sweeping bill that, among other things, would make asylum applications more stringent. This is at the Washington level. And it would restart construction of the Trump-era border wall and reopen immigration prisons closed by the Biden administration. I'm not aware of any prisons because this is a rather biased website and it calls detainment facilities, which are not really prisons in the full sense. It calls them prisons. So you got a lot going on there with HB 2 at the federal level, HB 20 at the state level in Texas. Will Texas take that extra step and be more nationhood-like in its approach to these things with the Biden administration apparently dropping the ball? Now, moving on, this next item is from Wyatt, one of my main contacts in the field. It's a description of Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. And Wyatt is among about 15 people right now in Maverick County, in the Del Rio district of the U.S. Border Patrol. What they're doing is they're patrolling about 1.5 miles at least of border frontage along the Rio Grande River. And just this past Thursday, a quick note, they repelled 62 people and made them go across the border, across the river back into Mexico, and there were about 8 more that had to go back across when their boats sank or took on water, because right as Title 42 was sunsetted, we've had some of the heaviest rain we've seen along the border in a long, long time. And it came along right at that point in time, including in my neck of the woods in the Rio Grande Valley sector of the Border Patrol. And so that has created rising Rio Grande River levels, and it's made the trip across the river very, 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 very treacherous. Now, this part about Article 4, Section 4, we'll get into that a little bit, and it's the next slide here in line. Article 4, Section 4, the one before that.
Yeah, okay.
Article 4, Section 4, this is from Wyatt's Facebook page. Texas Lives Matter with capital M-A on matter. Article 4, Section 4 of our Constitution, the U.S. one, requires our government to protect and defend our borders. In that part of the Constitution, it says the federal government will guarantee each state a Republican form of government and will protect each state against invasion. That's what it specifically says in the Constitution. If the government does not, if government does not, by the Constitution, by virtue of the named part therein, it authorizes the free citizens to defend themselves and their state in place of treasonous government. Note, in not defending our borders. The language is a little jumbled there, but basically it's just saying that the federal government, if it fails to enforce the border, it's acting, in the opinion of these border watchers, it's acting in a treasonous manner. And therefore, not only the state of Texas, but free citizens acting on their own volition have the right and duty to protect the border, protect their ranches, protect their homesteads, and so on and so forth, and the state at large, they feel. So now getting on with a little bit more data, you might recall last week I had kind of sketchy data on the number of border crossings, but this is pretty recent stuff here. This is just this past October 2022, moving into 2023. I believe that's what it is. Yeah, okay. No, these are the different lines, right? Excuse me. The orange line is 2020, and we had October through September, we had about 50,000 land encounters. These are where border agents will encounter illegal entrants, people illegally entering the country. And in 2021, the blue line, we see that it went from 50K over time up to about 150K, getting close to 200K. Then 2022 is the yellow line, getting up to 200K or better. And then 2023, 250,000 or a little bit better perhaps, and then kind of dipping down year to date. But these are land border encounters, not necessarily arrests as I understand it, but encounters. That includes people that got away as I understand it. And anyway, we have, now this is late 2022 into 2023. You'll notice that the grand total so far is 1.2 million, a little bit over. And that's U.S. Border Patrol. U.S. Office of Field Operations is 167,000. And it provides lots of data there from the official sources that viewers can, save the screenshots and get this data themselves. So lots going on there with these encounters. And we have a video of Todd Bensman, I believe, of the Center for Immigration Studies.
Todd, have you ever seen anything like this? You've been doing this your professional life. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Yes, I've seen this exact kind of thing for 2.5 years. It's been going on all along the border. The only difference now is that I think that the human flow, which has always been just unbelievably record-smashing, vast, huge, is going to be even more so. It's going to be on steroids. After Thursday, Friday, these people are ready to just challenge whatever's going on. American side, the majority of the people that are crossing don't give a rat's butt about whether or not they're going to get returned or anything like that. But the truth is that they suspect, as do I, that they are going to be continually released into the country. All the border facilities that they've built up for the last year are filled to capacity. In fact, they're 150% at capacity. So they can't even hold these people. They have to release them. They announced yesterday that they are going to be doing safe street releases. That is code for we just have to let them go and wander around and be on their own. And I believe that we're going to start to see that. Upriver, I'm hearing that there are huge groups starting to cross in areas that they never crossed before. Last night, by the hundreds, they're going to be under the Andalusia Bridge. Again, we've seen that before. That's going to be a record that we've played already. So, get ready.
Now, what he said there about seeing people cross areas that they've never crossed before is really important. My guy in the field, Wyatt, with the Border Ranch security team, about 15 people that I mentioned earlier, which includes ex-Marines with lots of expertise. What they're telling me is that some 30,000 or more who were not able to cross in Brownsville because Greg Abbott and the state police and the National Guard put up those multiple spools of concertina wire that you just saw in that video. Because of that, the migrants, as they're called, cannot get through Brownsville, which is about 45 miles to the east of where I'm at near the Gulf. And due to that, they're going to be looking for more remote areas. So they're beginning to move, as they understand it, toward the Del Rio sector, toward Del Rio and Eagle Pass and Normandy and Camado and towns like that. So once these storms die down, the expectation is the numbers are going to go up as migrants that have not surrendered to the authorities or otherwise gotten in the country, as they encounter this concertina wire, as they encounter barriers where there were none before or very few. As they do that, they'll move to these more remote areas. Then they'll be more vulnerable to the drug cartels and whatnot. And the last thing I'll mention is what's going on is really a two-tiered situation. In these remote areas, the drug cartels are running clandestine, subterranean, very shadowy operations to move contraband and fentanyl and human beings, trafficking human beings, probably illegal guns and things like that. So what happens is the DPS and the Border Patrol all congregate toward the ports of entry, where most of the women and children and some young men are coming in, where the massive numbers are coming up. And that takes away those assets from the more remote areas. And the only people taking up the slack are literally citizens operating largely on their own volition. And so that's the larger picture that you just don't get from the mainline media. So I think that pretty much rounds it out at this point in time. There'll be much more, of course, in the days and weeks ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Incredible pictures, and it's just extraordinary that this is allowed to happen by the United States administration.
Right, David, I'm afraid we've got to say you've got two video clips in this section on highly protected marine areas. We don't have them queued up, so you're going to have to just explain them, if that's okay.
No, okay. Right, so firstly, we've got the nature of the beast, the Scottish highly protected marine areas. The introduction reads as follows. The Scottish Government's vision for the marine environment is clean, healthy, safe, productive, diverse seas. If anyone can explain to me what diverse seas are, I'm all ears. Managed, they don't say by whom, but of course it means by the Scottish Government, to meet long-term needs of nature and people. Through the Butte House Agreement, this is a political agreement with the Green Party, extreme radical far-left pseudo-environmentalists. Scottish ministers have committed to designate 10% of Scotland's seas as highly protected marine areas by 2026. These sites will provide high level of protection by placing strict limits on some human activities, such as fishing and aquaculture, whilst allowing non-damaging recreational activities to take place at carefully managed levels. So fishing is damaging. We got that, yes? Now, the clip that we can't show is Fergus Ewing, firstly, explaining what he thinks of fishermen, the life they lead, the dangers they run, the nature of the communities that are centred around the fishing industry. And the second clip was of him ripping that document up in Parliament and saying exactly what he thought of the way they were treating the fishermen.
Can I just ask a question, David, there a second? I mean, are we talking about just commercial fishermen, or are we talking about recreational fishermen as well?
All fishermen, including recreational fishermen, yes.
Wow.
It's all controlled. There's no limit to the control. It's the Scottish government. Everything's controlled. Even the surfers would be controlled if it's, if they deem it necessary. Fergus continued to speak out about the nature of Scottish politics under the influence of the Green Party. And he said a few things that were very astute. He said, we focused on the essentials between 2007 and 2014, and having a strong economy is the number one essential. We cared about people. We wanted them to succeed. We supported business. We supported every walk of life, whether it was industry, farming, fishermen. We valued what they did. We said, you're worth something. You're worth something to Scotland. We seem to have stopped doing that now. This is very astute. Now, what has been the response to him speaking out against legislation that's harmful to fishermen and also on legislation that's harmful to the oil industry and lots of other industries in Scotland? Well, the former SNP chief, Murray Foot, he's not happy. He says Mr. Ewing was rude. He believed he was bigger than the party because he was the son of former President Winnie Ewing. I thought that was a particularly cheap comment. He said, what's the point of having a whip if it's never cracked? As he called on him to be disciplined. Now, Humza heard this message, and he said he may release the results of the bullying probe findings into Fergus Ewing. He said he'd be happy to check if there was an absolute legal bar to releasing the outcome of the investigation into the former Cabinet Secretary, Fergus Ewing. He said it was important to be as transparent as we can. Isn't that just lovely? You'll notice the parallels with Westminster here. Anyone who speaks out against the ideology that's been brought in by the far left and an element of the civil service, they're accused of bullying and hounded out of office. Seems to be a pattern. Now, just on the point of Humza's we need to be as transparent as we possibly can comment, this is how the SNP actually run their affairs. The Sunday Post reporting here that chiefs use private laptops to stop colleagues leaking information. The people are speaking out about this, calling on the swamp to be drained in Scotland, and goodness, there wouldn't be much left. It also describes ridiculous meetings where they wouldn't hand out papers at the meeting. This is the senior management meetings of the National Executive Committee of the party. They would say things like, we're not going to provide you with a paper copy of this. We'll pass round the laptop and you could read it on the screen. And that was the extent of what we got to see. They said, quote, there's no way to run an organisation, in no other organisation I've ever been involved in would this have been accepted. So that's the level of transparency that Humza actually has. But when it comes a chance to drop Fergus Ewing in it because he's speaking out against Humza's policies, then all of a sudden, Humza is very happy to be transparent. It does make you wonder where he came from. More on that story in extra time.
Okay, thank you, David. Now, we're just going to do a little bit of quick editing here, and let's move on to jury trials in Scotland.
Right, okay. Right, now, back in 2020, there was an attempt by the Scottish Government under the cover of COVID to take out jury trials, and there was an uproar, and it got dropped. So we have here the Daily Record report from 1st of April, April Fool's Day 2020. Trial without jury shelved after backlash. Now, shelved is only a temporary thing in Scotland. They always come back. So here we have Stuart Waiton, friend of UK column, writing in Spiked about this, about the SNP's elitist attack on trial by jury. So the Scottish Government, he writes, thinks the public is too backward to sit in on sexual assault trials. So aided and abetted by the judiciary, it's mounting an elitist assault on the justice system. So they're trying to abolish jury trials in rape cases. As far as politicians and senior judges are concerned, members of the public cannot be trusted to adjudicate on serious sexual offence cases. They think the public has the wrong attitudes and is not sufficiently aware or educated. So that's their view. It's not gone down well, however. Here we have Scottish Legal News. This is from back in, November. Juryless trials. Frances McMenamin QC, so she's the most senior woman in the Scottish Bar. She was saying that she had grave concerns over the proposals, that they were removing democratic participation from Scotland's criminal justice system and would affect not only the accused persons but the rights of every citizen in Scotland. She compared the retreat from trial by jury to Nazi Germany and communist China. So she didn't miss him and hit the wall. And then it got worse for the government after that. Ben Borland in the Express writing here, former Supreme Court judge warns no jury rape trials are a threat to Scottish courts. This is former Judge Lord Hope of Craighead. He says that this bill risks undermining the most basic principle of judicial independence. He said that the unprecedented potential for judges to be removed if they fail to convict alleged rapists in sufficient numbers made him very uneasy. Now, who's in charge of this monstrosity? Well, it's Angela Constance, of course, because obviously Angela Constance defended the pilot plan for rape trials without juries. She said jurors were influenced by rape myths, such as why the victim did not escape the attacker or report the offence earlier. She said evidence suggests this. Suggests, really, okay. Ms. Constance also argued that judges would be required to produce written reasons for their verdict. So that seems very convincing. Meanwhile, the Jurist, Legal News and Commentary magazine, reports that the Scottish lawyers are going to boycott the rape trials without juries. Vice President of the Scottish Solicitors Bar Association, Stuart Murray, said there's a concern that the duty of one's peers has been removed, and this takes to a great degree removes the diversity from the scene within the judicial system, leaves the system open to bias by single judges. So he sees it's really contrary to the interests of justice as a whole. Now, it seems that boycott is now going to be pretty much throughout the Scottish legal profession. So none of the lawyers are going to go along with this. And I just want to point this out, right? Because this is a unique moment. It's very rare now that you get an entire profession. And I'd have to say, if any profession is going to stand up, it is always the legal profession, right? Much as they have their problems, they're the ones that will stand up and say to the government, no, right? You don't see the medics doing that. You don't see any of the other professions doing that. They're standing up and saying, no, this is an assault on liberty. You're not on. We're not doing it. And that's a moment to be applauded.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got to thoroughly agree with that, David. And I'd just say that one only has to go into a family court hearing where there is a judge but no jury to witness the sheer horrors and abuses of a judicial system. That is how the children are stolen from parents, because, of course, it's all done essentially in a star chamber.
Okay, let's move on to Bilderberg.
Yes, our favorite group is finally coming around. They took this COVID break in 20 and 21 with their kind of resources and connections. I don't necessarily believe they ever took an absolute break. There must have been some sort of meeting level or private level goings on in those off years. The first time they ever missed 2 years in a row since 1954 when they came into existence. But the Bilderberg Group apparently is going to meet in Lisbon, Portugal, and evidently it'll be this coming Wednesday. or Thursday, whatever May 17 is, for about 4 days after that. That's what I'm hearing. What we're seeing on the screen here is Dan Dix, a Canadian journalist from Press for Truth. I've known Dan for, probably 10, 12 years covering Bilderberg, and he seems to have broken the story. I'm not sure exactly who broke it. I've got different people that watch out for Bilderberg, and I'll reach out to Kriston, my friend Kriston Harris. That's a guy, Kriston Harris in Wisconsin. He heard it through Dan, and then he immediately called me. We've kind of got it set up that way. And this is from Wikispooks, this next slide. And this is where it says, and I'm looking at my larger monitor, that they're going to meet at the Pestana Palace Hotel in Lisbon. And the perpetrators, it says, is the Bilderberg Steering Committee. That's the way they word it. And sure enough, it says 17 May through the 20th of May. This is rather unusually early for them to meet. Usually, if they meet in May at all, it's the very latter part of May into June, or it's just June, mid to early June, something like that. Since I've been covering it since 2010, and before me, Jim Tucker, and so on and so forth. Now, this next item here, get this. This is from a weekly tabloid in Portugal called, a little hard to read the top there. Maybe you guys can read it. The upper right corner. It's got an unusual name.
Tells, I think it's Tel 6 Qual.
Yeah.
TAL number 6 QUAL.
Right. That's a tabloid there in Portugal. And this is in Spanish, of course, but they broke the story evidently last November. And this came up only more recently on the Wikispooks website. So that's pretty good work for them, and it appears to be accurate. This is the hotel, not exactly a Super 8 shack along a lonesome U.S. highway where they'll be meeting. Can you imagine what a room there costs? So pretty posh. And of course, you have a number of newer viewers on UK Column that have gotten interested about the COVID issue, and that's what brought them to UK Column. You might be, before we get into a little bit more detail, you might be interested why we care about Bilderberg. Well, it's about 130, 140 people from North America and Europe primarily that meet every year, pretty much every year. They've done so since 1954 with minimal interruptions, and they're the cream of the crop of government and big tech. That's more recently big tech, and royalty, a little bit of that, and think tanks, and major bankers, current and former finance ministers, treasury secretaries, defense secretaries, current and former, usually the head of the CIA, usually somebody high up in British intelligence, always the head of NATO. And so these are not small players. And the big problem is they say they're meeting in their private capacity, not in their public capacity. And as independent journalists like us have always said, you simply can't do that. You're invited because you are the head of NATO. You're invited because you are the head of the CIA. So your private capacity, you cannot just make that transition magically. You cannot erase your public persona, your public job, what the tax dollars support you to do. And so if you meet privately with private people whose agendas are largely unknown, we don't know what's going to be cooked up in those kitchens. And under Chatham House rules, you don't even have to reveal it. And yes, Bilderberg has a website, a nominal website, bilderbergmeetings.org. And yes, they publish who's ostensibly there. We don't know if the list is complete or totally accurate. And they publish what they say they're talking about, but we don't know the full nature of the listed topics. And we, of course, strongly suspect and have reason to believe that there are topics discussed that are not listed in the press releases on that website. So this is the big problem. It's the total lack of transparency, this trying to operate in the cone of silence, kind of like the old Get Smart Spy comedy show that used to be on in America. That just doesn't wash with people interested in open government. So that's why we're interested in Bilderberg. This next slide here, we'll just kind of wrap this up. The Bilderberg Group also has an advisory committee consisting of a very small number of people that's shown in the next slide. And the Bilderberg Advisory Committee, it consists of, let me make this clear. This group may not exist anymore, but the Bilderberg Advisory Committee was evidently formed in 1981. This is not the same as the steering committee, which decides who to invite, where to have the meeting, what topics to discuss, and all the logistics. That's the steering committee, 30, 35 people, no more than 40. But this more exclusive advisory committee, evidently formed in 1981, has included Giovanni Agnelli. He's with Fiat Motors. George W. Ball, a American statesman. Ernest Vanderbugle, a Dutchman, I believe. William P. Bundy, longtime CIA, Kennedy White House, JFK in his day. Anthony G.S. Griffin. Some of these people, I don't know their pedigree. Henry Hines II. Max Comstam, David Rockefeller, who passed away in 2017. That's David Sr. Eric Roll, who I circled here, and Otto Wolf van Ameringen or whatever. Moving on a little bit about Eric Roll. This is interesting to UK viewers. Sir Eric Roll, Lord Roll of Ipsden, he did a interview sometime back, I believe it was in the 1970s, with the National Archives, the Harry S. Truman Museum within that. And so Sir Eric Roll was evidently involved with this Bilderberg Advisory Committee. Just a point of interest for UK viewers. I need not go into detail. And moving on from there, this is something from a Bilderberg-related official site. It tells a little bit more to viewers that aren't familiar with Bilderberg, and just to kind of refresh our own memories. From a legal point of view, the organization commonly called the Bilderberg Group is a foundation registered under Dutch law, and that's Stichting Bilderberg Meetings, whatever, the office of which is in Amsterdam, and I know that to be true. I believe it always was true. I believe it still is. This is administered by a board of trustees composed of 4 persons, so this is even smaller than the advisory group. A president, today the Dutch businessman and academic Victor Halberstadt, a treasurer, German banker Paul B. Achleitner, boy, I hope I'm saying that right, Achleitner, there we go. The president of the American Friends of Bilderberg today, Marie Jose Kravis. Her husband is a big financial wheel in the United States, and the president of the steering committee, the largest of those groups, Henry D. Castries, who is a longtime insurance magnate. They're supported in action by the steering committee. Only members and former members of the steering committee can be fully considered members of the group, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a little bit more about Bilderberg's structure that's not often discussed. We usually only hear about the steering committee, not these other smaller committees. And the American Friends of Bilderberg, which publishes regular tax forms that I look at for financial details, is a foundation created back in 1975. That's the year Jim Tucker started doing his Bilderberg hounding. And it's based in Washington and legally represents the interests of the group in the United States. And a similar group called the Bilderberg Association, there's another grouping, is a UK registered charity, which has as its trustees the British members of that steering committee, Zanny Mitten-Beddoes, editor-in-chief of The Economist, and Sir John Sowers, director of British Petroleum and the former head of MI6. So this is naming names and groupings to show the Bilderberg structure, why it's important. And these are just topics that were covered in the most recent times. Last year, they came out of their COVID hiding and met in Washington, D.C. They talked about, and they have a lot of one name topics, which creates, of course, some nebulous situations. NATO, China, Russia, and NATO, China, and Russia have been on Bilderberg agendas repeatedly, I might add. Some other ones that I marked: continuity of government and the economy going hand in hand with disruption of the global financial system. And that's an interesting pairing, I might observe here, from last year when they met at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Washington, D.C., where the Trilateral Commission met in 2014, a meeting that I infiltrated. But 2019, before the pandemic break, they met in Switzerland. And we see Brexit was on there, the future of capitalism. Once again, China and Russia. I'm reading off my larger monitor here. The weaponization of social media is an important one. Cyber threats, the ethics of artificial intelligence, what next in Europe, climate change and sustainability, which is a big thing with the global cities movement. That ties into my Urban 7 article that was just posted. So that's the latest. I had hoped to hear from Dan Dix, the Canadian journalist, to get more, but that'll probably be in the near future. But this is a fairly early revealing of where and when Bilderberg is evidently meeting. They have, the last thing I'll say is they haven't posted it yet, as far as they know, on the official Bilderberg website. So in that way, we beat him to the punch a little bit, as of course did Dan Dix, who kind of led the way on this one. So there we go.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for that. Of course, many people in UK, USA, worldwide still not aware of the power of the Bilderberg Group when they get together. But you've taken the lid off the organisation there, and it will be interesting to see what the latest debate produces. But yeah, these are the unelected people who are controlling national and international policy.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Right, David, we're well out of time, but let's just have a look at a final slide.
Yeah, this may resonate with anyone who's not in the medical profession but has been speaking out about the efficacy of masks and vaccines and all-cause mortality under COVID. And it's a woman saying, well, this is how she feels when someone tries to insult me by saying I'm not a doctor. But it's a compliment because I'm not the third leading cause of death in the country.
Silence.
Yes.
We'll leave it there. We'll say, David, thank you very much for joining us. Mark, also, we will have a UK column extra time in a few minutes. So if you're signed up with the UK column, please come and join us. If you're not, consider taking out a subscription and join in that extra time in a very much more relaxed format. We'd love to have you. We'll end there. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye.